So, vampires are a prominent force within the world of Lady Death. They are dark, horrific beings that exist in the shadows of society, and others operate in plain sight as powerful people with influence and money. They are a reminder that we as humans should not be so secured into thinking that we are in control of our own lives, and are alone in our world, as in reality there are darker and more powerful forces at play that we could only imagine in our nightmares. And so today, in our ongoing effort to establish the world and universe of Lady Death, I will be going over several of the known ancient vampires within the Chaos universe. What's going on, everyone? This is Ace, and welcome back to The Reckoning. And today, as I mentioned, vampires are the subject at hand. They truly are vital players in the world of Lady Death, and when it comes to power and politics of what goes on in this world, it also seems that the older the vampire is, the more influence and power they obtain. And so that is why I figured I would discuss the ancient vampires that we are made aware of within these stories. This again is not every single vampire, but maybe I can get to that video in the future. I will also mention these will be brief rundowns, as some of the characters have multiple arcs and stories, and so we will definitely deep dive into them in a future video if you guys want to know more. But before I continue, if you like what we do here, then feel free to give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, click the bell as well so that you don't miss out on any of the Lady Death, Purgatory, and Chastity content we have coming your way. Your support always means a lot, and so with that, let's begin. Okay, so starting off with one of the main pillars of the Chaos Comics universe and rival to Lady Death, the ancient Egyptian slave Saqqara, but you all probably know her better as Purgatori. In ancient Egypt, Queen Ostraka was Purgatori's first lover, and Purgatori at this time was known as Saqqara, who, as I mentioned earlier, was still just a human and was an Egyptian slave. The two would go from being slave and master to lovers, until a man named General Ramses found out about their relationship, threatened to strip Queen Ostraka from her titles and power if she did not marry him, and rid herself from this forsaken relationship with her slave girl. Ostraka, being the self-obsessed woman she was, agreed. General Ramses and his men would ambush the queen's slaves and kill every single one of them. But Saqqara, catching wind of this plan, barely escapes and runs for her life, where she would eventually find the ancient Celtic vampire named Wrath. Now, Saqqara's lineage and bloodline was that from the fallen angels, the Watchers, who used to roam this earth alongside man, but they were thrown down into the realm known as Hell after the second war that heaven knew. You all can check out this tale in my video I did titled Lucifer's Fall, which you can click in the corner there or down below. But anyways, due to her bloodline, the vampiric process morphed her into a winged, demonic-looking being, and she would take on the name Purgatori. But if anything, this form was a perfect representation of what she was all about: power. After vengeance, power would become Purgatori's new obsession. She scoured the ancient earth hunting for food, and in a way lived very similar to Wrath. But through different encounters and battles, she would learn blood alchemy and finally be granted permission to join Lucifer in Hell. But this was short-lived, as she assaulted the Chaos Lord. She couldn't control herself, as his blood allowed her to feel so much more powerful. It satiated her hunger tenfold, but she would be casted out to necropolis with the Roman deities as sort of a punishment from Satanas. She would make her way back to Hell, running into Marion, Lady Death's mother, within the nexus of all things. And then finally, she would return to Hell to manipulate Lady Death, as she believed if Lady Death truly defeated Lucifer and absorbed his power, then she would be the perfect 2-in-1 target. That power would be hers. Now, as the journey continues, Purgatori and Lady Death would time and time again be at odds with each other, and pretty much become rivals for all time. Purgatori would be banished from Hell a second time and be sent back to modern-day Earth, and it is at this time that her old acquaintances Jade and Cabala would become aware of her presence and wish to end her existence. Purgatori would have to endure the warring vampire clans, fallen angels, and of course the avatar of her hated rival, Evil Ernie, as he is bringing Megadeth, and not even Purgatori will be able to stand in his way. Despite all this, Purgatori learns of the ancient prophecy that she is intended to rise to godhood, and so she will stop at nothing to accomplish this.
Wrath. Wrath is an ancient Celtic vampire
who spent years living in a cave. A Celtic man knew of his whereabouts and gave them to a runaway slave named Sakara, who then sought him out. She desired immortality for vengeance, and he desired a soldier. She became a creature of unimaginable power, and who we all know as Purgatory. Wrath would often try to persuade her to work with him, or test her true limits. Though they were sometimes allies, they were bitter enemies as well. Wrath would always go back and forth on his admiration for Purgatory or his regrets for ever creating her, while Wrath for the most part wished to be secluded from the ever-changing ways of man in the modern world. He had no desire to be amongst what he deemed as an inferior species. He very rarely hunted and preyed on humans, as he was much more interested in devouring the blood of wild beasts, such as Siberian tigers or lions. Now, Wrath was actually transformed into the creature that he is now thousands of years ago. His parents dead, and he was under the care of his older sister. However, the two of them, while traveling, were struggling to survive a deadly winter, and it is here where Wrath, at his young age, seemed to pass away. His older sister, not wanting to leave his side, thought she would soon join him, but she would be approached by none other than the Chaos Lord Odin to save her and bring her to Asgard, where she would become a Valkyrie. Thinking that her brother had passed away, she never heard or knew of the monster he would become. Shortly after, Odin left with Wrath's sister, and Satrina, or Lilith, would approach the young boy's body in the snow, and it would be at this moment where he would become the vampire of legend. He also ultimately wanted Purgatory to accomplish her goal of becoming a goddess, as he knew that this meant Armageddon would come, and perhaps he looked forward to it. The annihilation of the current day society and the world perhaps meant a reset, and he could once again indulge himself in the ways of the past. Rubicante. He is the younger brother of Wrath, but it's difficult to say if this is by blood or perhaps they are just vampiric brothers. Needless to say, when comparing power, Rubicante is significantly weaker than Wrath, but he is still very powerful in his own right, as he single-handedly took out the remaining followers of Purgatory back in Necropolis, destroyed her temples, and sent some of his followers, who are these fallen angelic wolf vampires, to hunt Purgatory and try to frame Lady Death for it. Rubicante, being aware of Lady Death, is hoping that she and Purgatory will annihilate each other and therefore take care of all of his problems. He would eventually banish Purgatory to a realm known as Transdemonium, which is a realm that is adjacent to Hell. Think less of fire and brimstone and more like Hellraiser in the Cenobites area. Pleasure, pain, it's all the same down there. Suffering and the grotesque imagery fill this realm. Rubicante was hoping that this is where the two would finish each other off. Now, why he may be wishing for their demise is because he is aware of the prophecy that they both are involved in, that signals the coming of Armageddon, the end to everything. And if he can get rid of the connecting pieces, so to speak, then maybe he can prevent Armageddon from happening. Rubicante, as we've established, is not the strongest, but he is a schemer. He does his best to move the powerful foes like chess pieces for his own benefit. He seems to be filled with arrogance, pride, and believes that he can outsmart Purgatory and essentially use her to prevent Armageddon. He does not wish to see the end of times, as he enjoys having power and how the status quo currently is. He doesn't want his brother Wrath to interfere, and so purposely annoys him into seclusion. He wants to keep his brother out of the situation as much as possible. The two really have no meaningful relationship. Wrath states that Rubicante is only alive because he leaves him alone. He looks down on him because he involves himself in the world of man. Wrath sees their kind as superior and indulges in the savagery of being a primal, raw, and unaltered being, living his days in the wilderness and jungles of the world. Now, despite all of his efforts and plotting, Rubicante bit too much than he could chew, as he eventually, as a last effort, would try to stop Purgatory from becoming a goddess, and would have his spinal cord ripped from his body. Purgatory would then look to finish his brother Wrath shortly afterwards. Now, Dracula, I think, needs no introduction. He is the ancient vampire of legend. At one point, he was indeed human, a lord, a monarch, a demon king, but who would slowly grow to prominence and power within the world of man and vampire alike. He essentially held influence and fear of the European and Western vampire clans, which served as the rival to Jade and the vampire clans of the East. Over the years, he lived a dual life. In the vampire world, he was considered the leader of the Old Guard, and while he had plenty of followers in North and South America, which referred to him as the Black Bird, his influence was undeniably stronger in Europe. He also had infiltrated the Vatican with his vampiric kind, served to continue his reach and his grasp of power and influence throughout the world. Even the Pope at this time was indeed a vampiric servant to the dark bird Dracula. But the other side of this dual life was that he was indeed just Lord Dracula, a wealthy businessman whose connections helped mankind over the years during World War II, and a close support of the Catholic Church. He would have conflicting thoughts on humans, but one take is that he understood that a vampire could achieve its full potential by embracing their humanity and not casting it aside. That reminder of fragility, perseverance, and will was enough to unlock a vampire's true potential, a lesson he would teach Purgatori. Now his focus was to begin war with the younger clans, primarily American, as they seemed to be waning from his control. They viewed him and the older vampires as exactly that, old, dated, not in tune with the modern world, and they got it into their heads that they could rise to power and take over the old ways. At the same time, Dracula was wishing to get a treaty with Jade, as she was ever growing her power and influence throughout Asia, and she was working on unifying the vampire clans of the East. Dracula and Purgatori would run into conflict, as you can imagine, as, like Rubicante, Dracula wants this world to be his world and doesn't wish to see it be destroyed. And so with Purgatori being around, this only brings Armageddon that much closer. Now, Dracula is seemingly killed by Purgatori, but you never know with him. I would say he is the exact embodiment of saying legends never die. Jade, a 4,000-year-old vampiric sorceress that was created by the goddess Purgatori. In modern times, she has taken it upon herself to lead the Chinese triad and to single-handedly control the entire country's black market. This was what it appeared on the surface level, but the other piece of these efforts was joining not only the different Chinese vampiric clans, but also expanding her power and influence throughout Asia, and to unify the clans in competition with Lord Dracula and the vampires from the West. Now, Jade was bitten by Purgatori at Queen Ostraika's and General Ramsay's wedding night. She and her father were in Egypt as ambassadors for their respected kingdom, and were there that unfortunate night. Like Cabala, she was left alive and morphed into an incredibly powerful vampire, but she also wanted to know why. Why were their lives spared? What made them different? And unfortunately for both of them, they would come to realize the horrible truth in that their existence, their suffering, really meant nothing at all. Purgatori was a young vampire obsessed with vengeance, and although she slaughtered their loved ones and left them alive to become monsters, it was really just a mistake. Purgatori was just sloppy, and while her focus was on the queen, she disregarded them. This realization was almost unbearable for them, and they grew to a fit of rage. Now, arguably, Jade is the more powerful out of the two. Not only does she have beast-like transformations like Cabala, as she can turn into a literal dragon. Her hair is enchanted and can be used as a weapon, but she also seems to have extremely powerful mental abilities, reading people's thoughts, looking into their mind, accessing their memories. She can even paralyze them, but it should be noted that several vampires have this ability of paralyzation, such as Dracula. The other thing that Jade would have to mentally deal with is that Lucifer, aka Satanus, is not only indeed real, but that Purgatori had been with him before being banished to necropolis. This would be almost too much for her to handle, but she, even after learning this, would still join Cabala to get revenge for the lives they had lost. She led the Shanghai crime family as she had inherited for millennia, other crime families believing that Jade was simply a title given to the woman controlling the family every generation, but it was always her. She also tried to form an alliance with Dracula in order to have a protected unity with the vampire clans, but of course, Purgatori would put an end to that and disrupt Jade's plans. Jade is a feared name and vampire within the vampire clans of the East, and anyone would be wise to stay clear from her gaze. Cabala. Cabala was the queen of Tanzania, who received the invitation to participate in the wedding of General Ramses and Queen Ostraika in Egypt. It was an honor to take part in that event, and so she accepted the invitation and went with her husband, the King Kush. Cabala and her husband were shamed at their home as they could not conceive child. With the teachings of herbal remedies from Queen Ostraika, they finally succeeded. Before the queen and general got to wed, Purgatori attacked the celebration. And as we mentioned before, Queen Ostraika was Purgatori's first lover, but once General Ramses came into the picture and Sakara endured her lover's betrayal, she would be filled with sadness and hatred and longed for vengeance. She looked for a solution with the vampiric monstrosity known as Wrath, and was willing to do whatever it took to obtain the power to make those that crossed her suffer, and so that she could take her revenge on Queen Ostraika. Circling back to Cabala and Queen Ostraika's wedding, it would be here where all the guests, including Cabala and her husband, were were attacked by the Crimson Demon. But when Purgatori nosed her lover, the Queen, her attention became fixated on her, leaving the few that she had wounded the ability to flee and escape. But because of this, they would morph into incredibly powerful vampires. Cabala and Kush hurried back to their ship, but it was too late. They would be morphed into creatures of the night and soon craved blood. The child she was bearing would be deformed into a monster due to being infected with Purgatori's blood. She would eventually name the baby creature George. Cabala is a tragic tale, as she is terrifying in her vampiric form, taking on the qualities of some ferocious tiger or beast. But I say tragic because this isn't what she wanted. She and her husband were happy and finally about to be a family, and it was all taken from her that night. She is a monstrous being who craved blood, and yet why? Why did that happen? Why did Purgatori kill so many that wedding night but leave her to be like this for thousands of years? The thought became overbearing and depressing for her, and since she would have to be sad and sickened for eternity, then maybe killing Purgatori in the act of vengeance would bring just a glimpse of satisfaction. Cabala and Purgatori would battle multiple times, and she was so close to ending Purgatori once and for all. But by the end of the encounters, Purgatori would rip the heart from Cabala's body, and daylight would incinerate the vampire queen. While her death was incredibly gruesome, at least she now can have peace. Some of her followers still plot in the shadows, hopefully to one day take revenge for their queen. Satrina. Satrina, first wife of Adam, who is also known by the name of Lilith, sometimes depicted as the mother of Adam's demonic offspring. Lilith, or Satrina, was said to be created from the same dust as Adam and lived in the garden until Adam tried to dominate her. She wasn't having it and left on her own. The name Lilith appears in Isaiah 34 as a list of animals, and Lilith could be translated as night creature or night monster. And because of this, my thinking is that maybe, just maybe, the description is for what we now know as vampires. Lilith is often depicted as a dangerous demon of the night who steals babies. She is a symbol of chaos and seduction, which is why she is a good fit for this Chaos Comics universe. She is the emblem of feminist energy, representing resistance, empowerment, and self-determination. And I personally would suggest that she is the very first vampire, the great mother of all vampires across the globe. But who knows? As she may have vampire qualities, but she also could be something much, much more. Satrina was Adam's first wife in Eden. Now, Satrina first met Purgatori when she was banished from hell to the realm of necropolis by Lucifer. This was after her attack on Satanus, as she was less interested in him and more into his power. Now, once banished, Purgatori would engage in a revolt currently happening in necropolis. Oh, and I should say necropolis is the realm of the Roman gods, who have lost their believers and followers at this time, and so their power and influence is a dying one. So much so that they cannot even escape this realm. Now, the gods share this realm with other beings and monsters which tire of the gods. Purgatori sides with the monsters to conquer the Roman deities, and it's also here where she befriends her Griffin companion that we see in Lady Death and Purgatori's first encounter. After Purgatori has conquered this realm, Satrina became one of her lovers there. Satrina, being a vampiric and foreign visitor to this realm, may have also been on the side of the monsters, but this is unclear. Later, Purgatori and her Griffin friend would find a way through the nexus of all things to escape and cross paths with Lady Death. Thousands of years later, Satrina returned to Earth and sought out Purgatori in her human disguise. At first, Purgatori and her traded a few punches, but then they were taken over by passion and they shared a bed. Satrina asked Purgatori what she believes in and why she fights. Purgatori answered that she fights for and believes in power, which, as we all know, is such an appropriate answer for Sakara. Satrina wasn't here just to please Purgatori though. She had her own plans. She found one vampire hunter named Carmilla and wanted her to attack and kill Purgatori. Now, Carmilla would fail at her mission and suffer dearly for it, but not before she revealed that Satrina was behind her weaponry, magic, and the one who hired her to begin with. Purgatori, upon discovering Satrina's betrayal, would wait and bide her time before finally ripping out the ancient being's heart, thus putting an end to the ancient being and quite possibly the very first vampire. And that is all I have for ancient vampires within the Lady Death and Chaos universe. There are a multitude of emotions that I have for these characters. Some I feel for their tragic circumstance, and others I hope make their return. But regardless, the world of the ancients and their vampire children and clans are an awesome element and layer added to the stories of Lady Death. And now with the established Coffin comics, who knows, perhaps at some point we will get a glimpse glimpse into the world once again of vampires. But what are all of your thoughts on the ancient ones that we discussed here today? Do you enjoy vampire tales and folklore? Go ahead and leave a comment below, as I always enjoy reading your thoughts, and as always, I will see you in the next one. So until next time, take care.